Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Christian Moe here again from their Auto Talk review. This week we are in the 2015 Nissan Juke Nismo RS. Nissan has a long history of making the cars it wants to make, not always cars the market is asking for. The 2015 Juke Nismo RS is no different. Starting with the looks, it is pretty obvious that the Nismo RS is special. The new body kit and lowered ride height make the car look more menacing, and the styling touches like the large rear wing add an extra touch of aggression. With the brilliant silver paint on our tester, the black body kit, red mirrors, and the red accent stripe stand out. Those awesome looking 18-inch alloy wheels sure help things in the visual department as well. Of course, a performance car is about more than just looks. So the outside looks amazing, looks really sporty. The inside looks just as amazing and sporty. So let's start right here in front of me. I've got my steering wheel that is nice, and it's not quite thick enough, but it is fairly thick. It's got nice little sculpting on it, good handhold, and then it's black leather with red stitching. Got a red leather strip here at the top, and then it's suede on the outside edges, give you something really nice and grippy to hold on to. Then you have the seats. These are the sportiest thing in this cabin. This is one of the biggest upgrades going from the Nismo to the Nismo RS. These Recaro seats. They're thin back, like hardcore Recaros. You can see this Recaro right there, but I've got red leather and black leather and red contrast stitching, and then suede on the inside. Of course, you've got shoulder harnesses, or cuts for shoulder harnesses if you want to put a harness in this thing with a cage. And then the bolstering is insanely stiff and thick. It's really high out here on the waist, really high up here on the thigh. Sort of really holds you in place. They are made for larger adults. So I'm not exactly a small person, especially width-wise, but I'm not a big one either. But I have a bit of room. And everything just sort of follows that same sort of woohoo, super sporty sort of look and feel. Shift knob, leather with red stitching. Up here on the dash over the gauges, I've got this beautiful little floating hood to help keep sunlight out of the gauges, and it's also suede with red stitching. And I've got suede on the door panels. And then around the shift boot, and on top of the shift knob, and then right here around the dash, there's this nice little, it's just black plastic painted with silver and gold stripes, but it gives it this cool weave pattern that almost looks like a gold and silver carbon fiber in a way, and then it's gloss coated so it's nice and smooth. If you push on it, it's nice and stiff. The dash doesn't give, which is nice. It's sort of, you know, upper class sort of kind of feel. It's not a cheap plastic. It looks and feels really nice. Of course, the dash is pretty cheap plastic. Saved weight. Up here is cheap, gross plastic, so if you like to hang your hand out the window, that's going to get uncomfortable soon. But a lot of the really good driver-focused stuff is here. So you've got the armrests all covered in suede, and you got suede on the steering wheel, and the seats are great. Like I said, you got these nice sporty touches like up here over the instrument panel. And of course, in here we've got the Nismo tack, which is bright red with silver Nismo, and it looks great. I've always enjoyed the dash layout here of the Juke, where you've got the climate control and all the sport functions integrated into a single unit. You just hit the button, you just hit the climate button or the drive mode button, and then all the gauges change. It's really cool. But enough about what it's like inside. I mean, besides the sporty seats and stuff, it's still a Juke. Decent sized trunk, 4-wheel seats, nice headroom. This thing is all about what it's like to drive, so let's get moving. So the RS part of Nissan Juke Nismo RS is actually very important. Now, on paper, if you just kind of look at it, it just seems like this is the faster version of the faster version of Nissan's little hatchback crossover thing, the Juke. But really, the RS is more than just a faster Juke Nismo. See, the RS has a different engine, has a different differential, it has different suspension, it has different steering, and it has different brakes. So all of the things that make it go and handle and stop, you know, the important greasy bits, are all different. So it is still a 1.6 liter turbo motor, but this one is a more powerful version that makes 215 horsepower and 210 pound-feet of torque. And it's a stout little fun motor. One thing you do have to be aware of, and this is a little different from a lot of modern turbos, is you've got a bit of lag. The full torque band out of this motor doesn't show up until 3,700 RPM. So it's kind of high in the rev range, but it'll rev to 7 grand. So once you hit that, you're only halfway through the engine and you can still rev the snot out of it and keep going. It's a good punchy little engine. If you play around with the shifter and keep it in the power band, it's really fun. It just sort of grabs and launches. And for being a front wheel drive, front engine car, torque steer is not that big of an issue, even with that much power and torque. And that's thanks to its fancy limited slip. So this has a helical limited slip diff, and you only get that on the RS with the manual. It's the only model they make with it, and it makes a pretty big difference. Even if you just rev the snot out of it and just gas it, you get very little torque steer, especially considering what you can get out of the base Juke or the standard Nismo. So it does a really good job there. It helps with front end grip a lot. I know it's a sort of gross rainy fall day here in Tennessee, but when the roads are dry, grip out of the front end is way better than you expect it to be. You can just hammer into a corner hotter than you should, stand on the gas, and the car just sort of pulls itself through instead of plowing wide like you expect it to. It's kind of strange because you can almost feel the front diff working as it fights to keep the car in line. So you get this really weird sensation. Now, of course, that's just part of the formula. We also have different suspension. Now, the car is not just stiffer, it's also lower than the Nismo. And that alters center of gravity, which alters handling dramatically. I love the Juke Nismo. I hate that Nissan is making a good hot hatch that's on a lift kit, so they can sell it as a crossover. But having the lower suspension in this almost rectifies all those issues. It's still a little higher than your standard hot hatch, but not by a lot. And it's a fun little thing to fling around some corners. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, just enjoying some backroad fun, and the car just feels lively. It is nose heavy, but it doesn't really feel it. Body roll is very minimal. It just feels playful. It feels fun. It feels exciting. And like I said, having that stiffer suspension and that lower center of gravity really helps this car out. Then, of course, you get to the steering. Steering is a quicker rack, and the weighting is different. So it's an extremely quick rack. You don't have to move the steering wheel very far to get a pretty dramatic front end movement. Weighting is really good. It's not too heavy, not too light. They've just sort of got that nice middle ground. And of course, the faster you go, the heavier it gets. It's got that nice progressive weighting to it. Sadly, it is an electric steering system, so feedback isn't as great as it could be through the steering wheel. But you do get a little bit. It talks to you a little bit. You get a bit of vibration, a bit of movement in it, so you can sort of tell what's going on. You are fairly well connected to the rest of the car, especially thanks to these seats. Again, these seats are basically hard mounted in. They only have a couple of small adjustments to them. Everything's manual. You could slide them forward and back and stuff, but for the most part, they're pretty well bolted to the car, and they're so thin there's not a lot of padding, so you get a lot of vibrations through the seat, sort of let you know what's going on with the rest of the car, even if the steering wheel won't tell you. Brakes. So brakes get a pretty substantial upgrade over the standard Nismo. I think the Nismo has 11.4-inch front brake rotors. This has 12.6, so pretty big brakes for being a car that is, almost a foot shorter than a Honda Civic. You get pretty stout brakes. Hammering on them really hard, I did notice a little bit of fade, but nothing dramatic. And after that little bit of fade, I never really seemed to have any more issues. It just sort of had that little bit once everything warmed up, and then it just sort of stayed there. So I don't know what the rest of it is, but once I got there, that's just sort of how I had it. As for the rest of the car, past some popos, that was terrifying. I don't know how fast I'm going. I'm paying attention to you guys. But so, as for the rest of the braking system, there are better pads in this than the standard Nismo. But it's been so long since I drove the standard Nismo, I don't know how much of an impact that had on the braking. All I can say is that braking in this car is really good, a lot better than you would expect it to be. So, as for everything else about driving the car, I mean, it's pretty standard Juke. The stiffer suspension does hurt the ride a little bit. It is a little noisier in here than a normal Juke, but not by a lot. For the most part, it's just a standard car. You know, if you're not hammering on it, aside from the seats, you'd really never know you were outside of a normal Juke. You still have all the space, you know, like I said, you got this great headroom, lots of glass, it's easy to see out. You've got the big funky pointy fenders out front that you can always see, that's kind of fun. You know, I've got all my equipment that I need. I've got navigation, satellite radio. I've got Nissan's fancy around view monitor to make backing up and parking super easy. You know, it's just a good overall car. There's nothing that this thing is missing. Fuel economy, pretty decent. It's rated at 25 city, 31 highway with a 27 combined. Until I started really beating on it down at the tail of the Dragon, I was averaging about 27.5. You know, so I was right on that money. Beating it up and down the Dragon, that number dropped pretty dramatically to like 19. But again, I was really hammering on this thing, so that's to be expected. I've seen single digits in some cars up on that road. So overall, fairly fuel efficient. Yes, they do sell an all-wheel drive version of this, but that comes with the CVT and less power, so avoid that thing at all costs. This, comparatively to the standard Nismo, is better in basically every single way. The Juke Nismo is good. It's a really good little hot hatch. The Nismo RS takes it from good and makes it great. This thing is astounding. It feels way more planted. It's way faster. It's a lot more fun. So the quicker steering rack is great, makes the car feel a lot more playful. That lower center of gravity has a huge impact on the way this thing goes through the corners. It's just a great little thing to drive. Now, with all those upgrades and stuff, does come a cost. This car costs just a hair under $30,000. It's like $29,370 or something after destination and fees and everything. So it's not cheap. That said, it's still not that expensive. You can get a Golf GTI and spend more money. GTI does have a nicer interior, and the GTR is probably a better all-around car, but this feels way more playful than the GTI. And when you're buying something like this, that's very important. How playful it feels is super, super important. Plus, you do get some equipment you can't get on the Golf, like that fancy around view backup camera system where you got cameras on all four corners. That sort of stuff is not a thing you get on the Golf. So there is some equipment stuff that you can do. These seats, you can't get something like that on the Golf. So there are a couple of advancements. As for the seats, these seats are super great. They are probably some of the best seats that you can get in any Nissan, period, and that's including the GTR as far as like a sporty seat goes. But they are a little uncomfortable. There's not a lot of lumbar support. It's, I don't know, 60 miles or something for me to get to the tail of the Dragon. And after that 60 miles, and it's like, I wish I had a little more support somewhere, somehow. So once you're in the twisty bits, these seats are great. For normal driving, I could take them or leave them. The seats in the standard Nismo are great. They're super comfy, they're super supportive. So I think I probably prefer those seats better for 90% of the time. But otherwise, that's my only real complaint about this car. You know, seats are a little uncomfy. Meh. Anyways, so quick recap. Nissan Juke Nismo RS, a lot more powerful than the standard Nismo, a lot faster than the standard Nismo, handles better, it's lower, brakes better, steering's better. It's just better in every way. Fuel economy's good. I'm getting, 27.5 miles to the gallon out of this thing, even though it's a 215 horsepower little rocket with sport bucket seats in it and stuff. So, yeah, it's a good little toy. I dig it. I dig it a lot. I understand that there are people who think it's ugly, but who cares? You should not buy a car so that somebody else who's stuck in traffic with you has something nice to look at. You should buy a car that you enjoy driving, that you enjoy being in. For me, that is this. I do think it is a little bit ugly. The extra sport treatments on the Nismo here with the big wing and the red stripe and stuff make it a lot more bearable.
but it is still kind of an ugly thing, and I get that. But otherwise, it's just a fantastic little car, and I really enjoy being in it. I don't know if I could pay $30,000 for one, because I'm cheap and I hate to spend money, but I could easily see myself picking up one of these things used in a few years. For like 25 grand, this is a hell of a car, like a hell of a car. And I bet you if you were good with words, which I'm apparently not, if you could haggle with your dealer, I'm sure you could get a discount on one of these, bring that price closer to the 25 grand range. And for that much money, this is a phenomenal car. So anyways, once again, this has been Christian Moe for AutoTalk.com. I thank you guys for joining me on this rainy fall morning. As always, please leave a thumbs up if you like this video. Please leave a thumbs down if you didn't like this video, and then go ahead and comment to tell us what you liked or what you didn't. We want these videos to get better for you, and the only way we can do that is with feedback. I have to know what I'm doing wrong before I can fix it, peoples. So please go ahead and let me know. If you really love us, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button, and you can see all of our great content and video reviews. As always, I thank you guys for joining me. Get out there, drive, have fun. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next time.